NIC got the fucking juice.
Silk is the new gold.
What's going on, everyone? Welcome back to another episode of the JT Sports Podcast. I'm your host, JT. I'm here to give you guys my draft grades for every team with the conclusion of the 2026 NFL Draft. We're going to be going team by team, division by division, grading every single team's draft class. Then I'm going to hit on a few big picture takeaways that I have from this year's draft, why the Rams picking Ty Simpson is a much smarter selection than what a lot of you all may think. The 49ers have a huge problem that's holding them back from winning the Super Bowl, and it's not Kyle Shanahan. It actually is a John Lynch problem. The Jaguars, man, their draft wasn't just the worst, but it was an all-time terrible draft class. The Chiefs, meanwhile, continue to prove me wrong. Like, they prove everybody who wrongly declares that the dynasty is over, the Super Bowl window has closed, and with how well they drafted this year, it looks like their Super Bowl window has reopened. And I'm ready to give you guys my way too early pick for who I have winning the AFC, the team that I'm picking to represent this conference in the Super Bowl. Shout out to everybody that's tuned in, wherever you're watching. If you live, eat, breathe, and die football, hey, man, you have arrived at the right place. We're talking all things football, NFL, college football, 24/7, 365 days throughout the year. If you're a football junkie like me, smash that like button, subscribe to the channel, hit that bell icon so you don't miss when we drop new content and you can get your daily football fix in. We are not just a YouTube channel, we are a podcast. You can find this episode along with all of our previous ones on all podcasting platforms, Apple, Spotify. The links are down in the description below. If you enjoy this episode, you love the content, you want to support the grind, all we ask is that you give us a 5-star review. It takes less than 10 seconds to do so. Once again, the link to the JT Sports Podcast, available on all podcasting platforms, is down in the description down below. And without further ado, let's dive into it. The NFL Draft is over, which means it's time to... The NFL Draft is over, which means that it's time to grade every team's draft class, starting off with the AFC North. The Pittsburgh Steelers, I'm giving them a B. They added some plug-and-play pieces on the offensive line. They got a very good offensive tackle from Arizona State. Is he going to end up replacing Broderick Jones, who has some injury concerns? Possibly. Then they got Jennings Dunker in the third round out of Iowa, who could be another possible plug-and-play offensive lineman. Maybe he ends up replacing Isaac Samalu at offensive guard on that left side. But my favorite pick that the Steelers made this draft was when they missed out on Mekhi Lemon. Remember how Jerry Jones made that trade with his ops to let them jump ahead of the Steelers? The Eagles end up stealing away Mekhi Lemon when he was on the phone with the Steelers about to make it official. The best way the Steelers could have made up for that was by getting Jeremy Bernard. Jeremy Bernard, to me, was the third best receiver in this class. He's not an insane athlete, but he has very good hands. He's a very good route runner. He is very shifty and nimble after the catch. And he was the best player on Alabama last year. And if you're the best player on Alabama, you normally tend to be a very good player in the league. The reason why I didn't give the Steelers an A- was, for one, I'm not a fan of the Drew Aller pick. Look, I get it. The Steelers were looking to add another quarterback. We don't know if Aaron Rodgers is going to play or not this year, even though I'm sure he's going to play this year. But regardless, there was nothing wrong, no harm in the Steelers adding a developmental quarterback, unless it's Drew Aller. I just think drafting Drew Aller is a waste of a draft pick. Everybody has potential. the thing is, not everybody's able to live up to it. And that's the thing with Drew Aller. Drew Aller has been the best quarterback in the history of football at convincing everybody that he has the potential to be a great quarterback. I've been hearing this potential talk with Drew Aller since his first season starting at Penn State. And I'm just tired of it. He was living off potential in college, never lived up to it, comes into the NFL, still living off potential. I'm good off Drew Aller. I'd rather have used that pick on another receiver, another offensive lineman, maybe some more depth in the secondary. Now, I do like the addition of cornerback Dalen Everett that they also got in the third round out of the University of Georgia. Has very good size, 6'1", 196 pounds. He's a physical press man-to-man corner. He isn't going to be one of those guys that can come in and start right away for the Steelers, but he's a good developmental guy, good depth piece, can contribute on special teams. The Steelers had a solid draft. Could have been a lot better if they didn't draft Drew Aller. I'm sorry, but we already had to go through a whole year of people gassing up Will Howard, a 6th-round pick. Now we're going to have to go through another offseason, another year of people saying, we need to give Drew Aller a shot. We need to see what Drew Aller has. No, thank you, brother. I don't want to see what Drew Aller has because he has nothing but potential. I'm good off that. The Ravens had one of the best drafts in the NFL, only behind the Cleveland Browns. They have an A-. The Ravens draft was an A-. I love their first 4 picks. You got the best offensive guard in this draft out of Penn State. I'm not going to try to pronounce his first name, but I will pronounce his last name, Ione. He was not just the best offensive lineman in this class as far as offensive guards go, but you talk about a mauler, somebody who just is a freight train. This is what Ione is. And he's going to be a massive upgrade from the guy they had last year, Daniel Falemin-Young, who was allowing Lamar Jackson to run for his life back there. This guy's going to be so good. You're going to forget just how bad Daniel Falemin-Young has been for the Ravens for the last few years as a starter. They also got 2 very good receivers in round 3 and 4. Jacoby Lane out of USC, good contested catch guy. He's going to be a weapon for Lamar potentially in the red zone. He can go up and get above the rim, win those 50-50 balls, get those contested catches. Elijah Surratt, a little bit of a different skill set than what Jacoby Lane has. He's not really a physical receiver. He more so is like Keenan Allen, not the most fast, not the most athletic, but he has very high IQ, a good understanding of how to attack leverage, how to find the openings in zone coverage. He's also pretty elusive after the catch, not a burner after the catch, but he's a little wiggly, can break out of a few tackles here or there. He has very dependable hands. I wouldn't be shocked if Elijah Surratt ends up becoming a very productive player for the Ravens and fairly quickly, since he's one of those kinds of players with his skill set. It's hard to keep him off the field since he always is going to be in position to make plays, smart ones at that. A great value pick that the Ravens have made that nobody is paying attention to is them selecting Alabama tight end Josh Cuevas in the 5th round. Jerry Bernard was Alabama's best player on offense last year. Josh Cuevas easily was the 2nd best player on that offense. He was reliable in 3rd down situations for Ty Simpson. He saved Alabama from disaster in a few games. Josh Cuevas runs very good routes, good hands. He's an okay blocker. He should be a solid tight end. I don't think he's going to be Isaiah Likely good or Mark Andrews good, but I could see him being like the new Dennis Pitta. If you're an OG Ravens fan, you remember who Dennis Pitta was, that's who Josh Cuevas reminds me of. Just solid, not great. He's going to come in, give you like 30 catches, 400, maybe 500 yards at the best. Josh Cuevas is a very good pickup for the Baltimore Ravens. The Cincinnati Bengals, believe it or not, had a pretty good draft. They didn't have a lot of picks, but I felt they did the most with what they had to work with. Cassius Howell was their first pick of the draft. They got him in round 2. Short arms, but incredible athlete, very freakish. And with how bad they got it with their first round pick last year, I feel Cassius Howell can help make up for that. Texas A&M produces very good defensive linemen. It just somehow happens that the Bengals drafted the worst one of them all last year, and they can make up with that with the draft pick of Cassius Howell. Cornerback, Tacario Davis, I really like a lot. Very good size. It's just, is he going to see the field? Even though the Bengals had a lot of holes on defense last year, one of the few bright spots on this side of the ball was how good their cornerback play was. Maybe Tacario Davis can come in if a guy gets injured. Maybe a guy underperforms. The size is there. The potential is there where he could be a solid, above average corner in this league. I love Connor Lew, who is an interior offensive lineman that they got from Auburn. He played center at Auburn, but I wouldn't be shocked if we saw him play either left or right guard for the Bengals, since their interior offensive line definitely needs some help. Brian Parker is another interior offensive lineman that has the capability of being an okay starter in this league. And then the Kobe Young pick, I like, because I do like his skill set. He does have some pretty good hands. He does have the ability to win those jump ball situations. I just don't really know if the Bengals needed a wide receiver in round 4. I would have continued to either double down on the offensive line or continue to double down on that defense. Receiver is the strength of the Bengals. They got plenty of great receivers behind T. Higgins and Jamar Chase. I don't really think you needed a Kobe Young. I don't even know if he's going to get any real PT after the preseason. The Cleveland Browns had an A-plus draft. They had the best draft class in the NFL this year. The past 2 drafts for the Cleveland Browns have been shockingly very good. But this draft was so outstanding just due to the amount of great offensive linemen that the Browns have come away with. The Browns made improving the offensive line a focal point of this offseason. They not only attacked the offensive line heavily in free agency, but in the draft, they spent 3 picks on the offensive line. You got Spencer Furneaux in the first round, who's going to be an instant starter for you. Either you play him at tackle, you play him at guard, either or. You got a swing offensive tackle in Austin Barber out of Florida. I don't know if he is a guy that has a high ceiling as a starter, but he is a very good backup. If you can find somebody that can play both tackle spots and give you serviceable level play there as a backup, he's worth a 3rd-round pick. I love Parker Brailsford, who's a center out of Alabama, who they also got in the later portions of the draft. I felt he was one of the most underrated centers in all of college football. He could be a future starter down the road for the Cleveland Browns. If not, he could be starting for the Browns as early as this season. He has a very good football IQ. He was pretty solid run blocking, pass protection, just an overall solid offensive lineman. He doesn't have freakish size. He's not a crazy athlete. He just is a very good, smart, and instinctual football player. I don't know that much about offensive linemen, just being honest with you, but I watched a lot of Alabama. Parker Brailsford was one of the few good things about that offensive line. They also didn't just walk away with some very good offensive linemen. They got 2 very good receivers that could end up not just starting right away for them, but having a massive impact on this offense's improvement under Todd Monken. You got Casey Concepcion, Denzel Boston in the 2nd round. You got Casey in the 1st round. Casey Concepcion, he would have been a lot better if the quarterback play was a lot more consistent from Marcel Reed. Very good hands. He has a very good route tree, but he's very dynamic after the catch, has very deceptive quickness. I feel he's a lot faster than what he ran at the NFL Combine. Denzel Boston, not really the biggest fan of, since it's not really him. It's more so his playing style. I'm not a fan of the whole 50-50 jump ball receiver guys, at least guys that rely on it more than they do creating separation, getting open. Denzel Boston is one of those guys that every catch he makes is kind of a contested catch. And I don't really like receivers like that. But Denzel Boston does have some very good bunnies. He can jump with the best of them. Solid, dependable hands. Hey, regardless of how good these guys end up becoming, they're better than whoever the Browns had at receiver last year. I think that Casey Concepcion could end up being their second best wide receiver. Denzel Boston possibly could emerge as their wide receiver 3, wide receiver 4. At least they got some receivers that can actually catch the football this year, no matter who they have starting at quarterback. And I can't forget, on defense, they made some very good draft picks as well. You got Toledo safety, Emmanuel McNeil, Warren. I don't know how he fell to this round of draft. Some folks felt he would have ended up being a first-round pick. He could end up being a potential plug-and-play guy, has a lot of versatility, a lot of creative things that you can do with Emmanuel McNeil, Warren on defense. You got Alabama linebacker Justin Jefferson in the 5th round. Sure, he's undersized. He may not be that good against the run, but he's going to be a damn good coverage linebacker, good in nickel, dime packages. He could be a very good third down linebacker for you. He's 6 foot, 223 pounds. So, yes, he is lacking in size. What he lacks in size, he makes up for in athletic ability. You talk about a guy that can move sideline to sideline. Justin Jefferson is just like Usain Bolt playing linebacker out there, and he's also very good in pass coverage. And with us probably expecting the worst when it comes to JOK's future in the NFL, I think Justin Jefferson is kind of a little bit in the ballpark of a JOK, even though he's not as complete of a linebacker as what JOK was. And then Taylor Green, look, I get it that Taylor Green is more so of a developmental prospect, but you give a guy like Todd Monken Taylor Green with all these physical tools to work with, he probably won't start at quarterback. He won't be a factor in the Browns quarterback competition, but Todd Monken probably has some fun packages for Taylor Green, some goal line packages, some design wildcat formations and short yardage downs for Taylor Green. I felt the Browns had the best draft in the NFL this year just based on the value that they got, how many potential starters they got. There's about 5 guys that the Browns drafted this year that not only could be starters for them, but very good, impactful ones at that. I was very impressed with how well the Browns drafted this year. Moving on to the AFC East. The AFC East didn't really have too many great draft classes. Now, the draft classes weren't bad, but they just didn't really blow me away. I gave the Patriots a B- for their draft. They got much needed help at offensive tackle with Caleb Lemieux. Will Campbell, you're playing offensive guard now. Congratulations, which is where you should have been when they drafted you last year. Then you got Illinois' edge rusher Gabe Jacques, who I don't think the ceiling is that high for Gabe Jacques, but I do think that his floor is pretty high. I think he could be a consistent 6-8 sack per year guy for the New England Patriots. I don't know how much instant production they're going to get out of Gabe Jacques in day one. Of course, he's going to get a good amount of snaps since, pass rush is one of their biggest areas of need right now. Even after the draft, they still need to add another pass rusher, probably out of free agency. You get a veteran there. I'm not expecting instant gratification out of Gabe Jacques, but I do expect him to turn into a very good pro 2-3 years from now. The thing with the Patriots is after their first 2 picks, I don't think they really got that much value after in the rounds following. You got a tight end from Notre Dame, Eli Raridan, who's an okay backup, but Notre Dame tight ends are pretty good. Notre Dame kind of is like tight end U. But then you got the Matrix Cronover from Texas A&M, a very good offensive lineman prospect. If we're talking about guys that potentially could be developed in the starters down the road, if you can walk away with a 6'7", 319-pound offensive lineman in the 6th round, I think that's very good value for the upside at that point in the draft. You're more so looking for guys that can contribute on special teams, be good depth pieces. It's just, I don't think the Patriots got a lot of value from this draft, unlike the Browns did. The Browns draft class makes them a much better team than what they were last year. I can't say the same for the Patriots. I don't think they're that much better from this draft class as to what they were before this draft took place. The Buffalo Bills, I kind of feel the same way. I do like the selection of T.J. Parker, who they got in the second round, who is a edge rusher out of Clemson. Very powerful. He's going to be an anchor against the run. Sure, he had a down season in 2025, but he still was pretty good. 2024 probably was his best film, the film that stands out the most. The upside is still great. Even though last season was a down campaign for him, it was still pretty good, just not as good as what his previous season was. I hated the Bills' selection of Ohio State cornerback Davison Egbinosun. Every time I watched the Ohio State game, Davison Egbinosun was one of the few cornerbacks that was always getting toasted. He's a penalty magnet and coverage as well. He had like over 30 penalties, according to Pro Football Focus, along the course of his career. Sure, the physical traits excite you, but Davison Egbinosun, when you just have the coverage issues that he had in college, I just don't really see him translating that well to the NFL. And just in general, the Bills general manager hasn't been good when it comes to drafting corners. So I don't like the selection of Davison Egbinosun. I feel that's a lost pick. I know Bills fans are going to be upset with that, but if you're watching the film on these prospects, if you watch Davison Egbinosun, I'm not hating. This dude was getting burnt consistently when he was playing for Ohio State. I do love the selections of UConn receiver Skylar Bell and South Carolina safety Jalen Kilgore. Both of these guys should be eventual starters. Skylar Bell could end up having an immediate impact. He is a phenomenal route runner. This guy just gets open. That's the simple way that you can put it. He gets open, and if you're a receiver that gets open, guess what? The quarterback's going to throw you the football. I could see Skylar Bell being one of the more productive mid-round receivers this season. Jalen Kilgore, one thing about South Carolina is that they always produce very physical and athletic defensive backs that have a variety of versatility in their game. Jalen Kilgore is kind of what people feel Nick Emery is. He can just do so much. He kind of is like that, but he's not the athlete that Nick Emery was, but he has a lot of experience. He played the star position, so he's pretty good playing that slot position, not just in coverage, but also has a very good run defender at that spot as well. And I kind of feel that's why Jalen Kilgore went where he went to the Bills, since he kind of more so is just a good slot player. I don't really know if you can line him up at safety and he give you the same impact as what he does at the star. But overall, I felt the Bills had a okay draft. I don't love it, but I don't hate it neither. It's okay. It's okay. The Miami Dolphins, I'm giving them a B, which is more generous than what I've seen most people give the Dolphins. Their draft had a mix of good and a mix of bad. I guess depending on who you are, you're going to feel the Caden Proctor pick kind of was the emphasis of that. It's either you love it or you hate it. Caden Proctor, his upside is easily Trent Williams. The athleticism, the size, it gives me Trent Williams. The floor, though, I don't know who are some of the worst offensive tackles to ever play, to ever get drafted in the first round, but Caden Proctor could be that bad. It's not for lack of talent. It just more so is lack of work ethic, lack of commitment. He's one of those players that you stay away from because you don't know just how dedicated they are to the game. And he's one of those guys, he gets that rookie contract, he's going to be complacent. And at Alabama, he was the kind of player that just frustrated you because there was so much juice to squeeze out of the orange that you just couldn't, because the work ethic was just severely lacking. Now, the Dolphins could turn him into a dog. You know, you go to Miami with everything that's around the dude, you either turn into a dog or you end up getting distracted and you become a dog chasing other dogs. And Caden Proctor, he's either going to be a dog for the Dolphins or he's going to be a dog chasing other dogs in Miami. Chris Johnson in the back end of round one, I like the pick. I saw a lot of Dolphins fans watching some of his highlight tape on X that say he doesn't get his head around. He's going to be a pass interference magnet. Chris Johnson has very good ball skills. He's a very good instinctual player. And sure, he may not get his head around, but he has very good technique, very sound footwork. Chris Johnson went where he was supposed to go. I had a late first round grade on him. He ends up going to the Dolphins with a late first round grade. Although I felt that Colton Hood would have been a better pick for the Dolphins, but I don't necessarily know what kind of scheme Jeff Hafley is going to be running. So if he's running a lot of zone, then I guess Chris Johnson makes a lot of sense. But if he's going to be playing a lot of man coverage, then Colton Hood would have been the better of the two. But I think that Chris Johnson was a good pick. The best pick the Dolphins made this draft was getting Texas Tech linebacker Jacob Rodriguez in the second round. He was the best linebacker in college football last year. He was a much better tester at the combine than what most expected him to be. He's great in coverage. He's a good tackler. And I feel Chris Johnson and Jacob Rodriguez are going to be very good building blocks for what Jeff Hafley is trying to do on the defensive end of things. Now, I think that Caleb Douglas, Texas Tech wide receiver that the Dolphins drafted in the third round, was one of the worst picks of the draft, one of the biggest reaches. He wasn't really that good. Okay, then you drafted Chris Bell, another wide receiver in the third round. I like Chris Bell a lot. I don't think he has high-end speed. He more so is one of those receivers that has build-up speed. He's a very good possession receiver, though. Think Eric Decker. Remember Eric Decker, who used to wear number 87 at receiver for the Broncos during the mid-2010s? I get Eric Decker vibes from Chris Bell. He's just a very good move-the-chains wide receiver. You're looking for a go-to target for Malik Willis on third down. Chris Bell could be that guy. I also love Kevin Coleman, getting him in the back end of the draft out of Mizzou. He's just a slot receiver, but he's very wiggly, very shifty in the open field. I think that either Chris Bell or Kevin Coleman end up seeing the field for the Dolphins this year and give them serviceable production at receiver. And then I also like linebacker Kyle Lewis out of Pitt. He's undersized, but he's good in coverage. And I like Texas safety Michael Taft, former walk-on, hard worker, blue-collar kind of guy, very smart IQ, just not very athletic, and you wonder how much his lack of athleticism is going to hinder him at this level. I think the Dolphins had a good draft. I give it a B. I like it more than most people do. And then the New York Jets had the second-best draft class in the NFL this year, right behind the Cleveland Browns. I'm giving the Jets an A+ for how they just dominated the draft this year. Their first four picks are going to be high-end starters. David Bailey, they took him second overall over Arvell Reese, which was the right decision. You don't draft a guy like Arvell Reese if you're on the hot seat, that being Aaron Glenn. Aaron Glenn doesn't have time to wait for potential with Arvell Reese. He just went for the guy that has the high floor but lower ceiling than what Arvell Reese has, and there's nothing wrong with that. I'd rather draft a safe prospect that I know is going to be good, that's going to be on my team after his rookie deal is up, than draft a guy that I don't really know if he's a better off-ball linebacker than he is an edge rusher. So I felt they got it right with David Bailey. You don't try to overcomplicate things when you're already in a complicated situation. If you are Aaron Glenn, you keep it simple, stupid. You just draft the guy who is the better player right now. And I feel personally, Arvell Reese versus David Bailey is going to turn out the same way that Aiden Hutcherson versus Trayvon Walker ended up. The Jaguars made the moronic decision to draft Trayvon Walker over Aiden Hutcherson just because Trayvon Walker had more potential, because he looked better running in shorts and a tank top, and we see how bad that pick has aged ever since. Trayvon Walker's a good player. He just isn't as good as Aiden Hutcherson, who has been one of the best defensive players in the league since he's been drafted. That's the kind of mistake that the Jets had to avoid, and they did that by taking David Bailey second overall over Arvell Reese. Kenyon Sadiq, hey, look, I thought they could have went Mekhi Lemon. I'm not going to be mad at the Jets taking Kenyon Sadiq. Here's why I feel like the Jets drafting Kenyon Sadiq is extremely overhated. if you have an elite receiver and an elite tight end, which one is more difficult to defend if you're an opposing defense? Having an elite tight end. When you have a tight end that's running 4-3 with the yak ability that Kenyon Sadiq has, he's a matchup nightmare. You can line this brother up anywhere. You can keep him at tight end. What linebackers are going to be able to keep up with Kenyon Sadiq? There's probably only one linebacker that can hang in coverage with Kenyon Sadiq, and that's Sonny Styles, who plays for the Washington Commanders. How many safeties even have the size or the physicality to keep up with a Kenyon Sadiq? Not too many. Really, the only defensive backs that can guard a guy like a Kenyon Sadiq is a Nick Imawari or a Derwin James. You just can't put anybody on Kenyon Sadiq. You just can't put a linebacker on this guy because most linebackers don't have the coverage ability nor the speed to just hang with this. And then if you put him in the slot, what slot corners are going to be able to hang with Kenyon Sadiq? If you put him outside as like a perimeter receiver, he could still be very effective. It's just so many different matchups that Kenyon Sadiq can create for an opposing defense that drafting him 16th in favor of any receiver, Mekhi Lemon, I felt was a good pick because out of all the receivers in this class, I feel Kenyon Sadiq had a higher ceiling than all of them, even though he's a tight end. This receiver class was okay, but it wasn't no Jeremiah Smith, no Jamar Chase, no Justin Jefferson kind of prospect. So I felt that them getting Kenyon Sadiq was a pretty good pick. And then they just double back in the end of the first round anyway. They trade back up to get Omar Cooper Jr., who I also was very high on. He reminds me a little bit of Deontay Johnson, number 18, who was primarily known for his tenure with the Steelers. And then, like most Steelers receivers, he got cut, got released. They didn't bring him back, and haven't heard from the brother ever since. But just as a very good tactical route runner, very dynamic after the catch also. I felt Omar Cooper Jr. is just a solid receiver. I don't think the upside's high for him, but I think that he's a high-end wide receiver too that's going to stick around for like 6-7 years with your organization because he's not going to ask for much. It kind of reminds me of Christian Kirk a little bit. Now, I love D'Angelo Ponce. I love me some D'Angelo Ponce, one of my favorite players from out of this class. Prime example of how size is just a number. He's 5'8", doesn't matter. Aaron Glenn was 5'8", and it's crazy how he's the head coach of the Jets now. And Aaron Glenn already said that D'Angelo Ponce's size is not going to hold him back from being able to play both in the slot and on the perimeter. Allow D'Angelo Ponce a chance to compete. Tank Dell, he was undersized. He was only like 5'8", 5'9" coming in, and he's been pretty good when he's been able to stay healthy. Key word, when he's been able to stay healthy. The Texans have lined Tank Dell, despite how small he is in the slot on the outside, because no matter what your size is, if you're good, you're good. If you're a dog, you're a dog. And that's exactly what D'Angelo Ponce is. He's a dog. And when you got a dog, you don't keep him on the leash. You let that dog run wild. And that's exactly what the Jets got to do. You got to let that brother play inside, outside. Hey, I could see a guy like D'Angelo Ponce clamping up a DK Metcalf. One thing about D'Angelo Ponce, you're just not simply going to outmuscle this dude because you have more size on him. You got to be very technically sound. A guy like DK Metcalf would easily get boxed by D'Angelo Ponce because you can't outmuscle D'Angelo Ponce. D'Angelo Ponce was clamping up Jeremiah Smith in the Big Ten Championship a few months ago. So if you can get right with Jeremiah Smith and don't let the box score deceive you. I know Jeremiah Smith had a great game on the stat score or the box score, but if you watch the head-to-head matchups Jeremiah Smith had with D'Angelo Ponce was getting right with Jeremiah Smith on a few reps. So if D'Angelo Ponce can get right with Jeremiah Smith, you can get right with the majority of receivers in the NFL, since Jeremiah Smith is probably the greatest receiver prospect in NFL history. So if you're clamping up Jeremiah Smith, hey, you can play outside corner even if you're 5'8". And then I loved Darnell Jackson, defensive tackle out of Florida State, who they got in round 3. Florida State's defense wasn't that good. Darrell Jackson, this dude just pops off screen. He just looks like he looks like one of those old school throwback defensive linemen that just, they're so big, they're muscular. You can just tell by the physique, this dude is a specimen. I love the Jets draft. I felt they had the second best draft this year, only behind the Cleveland Browns. I'm giving them an A+. Now we got to move on to the dreaded AFC South. I got to get a sip of water real quick. The Jacksonville Jaguars had an F+ draft this year. This was not only the worst draft from this year, but this is one of the worst draft classes in NFL history. The Jaguars came into this offseason needing to find a replacement for Devin Lloyd, who was their starting linebacker last year, who, when he was on the field, the Jaguars had a top 12 defense. When he was off the field, the Jaguars' defense was significantly worse without him. And with him having that big of an impact, I thought the Jaguars were going to prioritize making sure they found a good replacement for him. And there was a good replacement for Devin Lloyd available in the second round. His name was Anthony Hill. Instead, he ended up going to the Texans because the Jaguars thought it was a smart decision to draft a pure run-blocking tight end over one of the best linebackers in this class, and Anthony Hill Jr. from Texas, who would have been an instant plug-and-play starter for the Jaguars and might have been able to give them 40% of the production that they were getting from Devin Lloyd. Instead, you drafted a guy that probably isn't going to see the field. The guy isn't that athletic. He doesn't really have much production at all. And this wasn't the only reach that the Jaguars made. This draft was just full of nothing but reaches, but their decision to get offensive guard Emmanuel Pregnon in the third round out of Oregon. Emmanuel Pregnon is going to be an instant day one starter at guard for the Jacksonville Jaguars. This dude is a menace. He was just bullying guys last year at Oregon. That's the only simple way that I can describe his film. Like I said earlier, I'm not an expert when it comes to offensive linemen. Most of the times, I don't even know what the hell I'm looking at when I'm watching these offensive linemen play. But a guy like Emmanuel Pregnon, when he's just pancaking guys left and right, just mauling guys to the ground, I had a day one grade on him. And the Jaguars got him in the third round. This is the only player that the Jaguars didn't reach for. Outside of Emmanuel Pregnon, nobody from this draft class is going to have an impact on this team winning games. And they probably won't even be on the team 3-4 years from now. This was a Trent Baalke level draft out of James Gladstone. If anything, this could be a lot worse than any draft that Trent Baalke has put together, because at least Trent Baalke didn't reach for the amount of guys that James Gladstone reached for this year. I don't know what James Gladstone had going on. He just outthought it. That's the only way you can put it. He just outthought himself, and it's going to put the Jaguars in a very difficult situation this year trying to get back to the playoffs, which we'll talk about a little bit later. The Houston Texans, I'm giving them a B+ for their draft. The Houston Texans have solidified themselves as the team to beat for the AFC this year. They already had a Super Bowl caliber team. Kyle Shanahan, before the start of the Super Bowl last year, said that either the Seahawks or the Texans had defenses good enough to win the Super Bowl as long as the offense, mainly the quarterback, didn't F it up. Sam Darnold didn't F it up. That's why the Seahawks won the Super Bowl. But Coleridge, Bernard, Stroud, unfortunately, he F'd it up for the Texans. Hopefully this year, with the Texans drafting the guy in Kalen Ratledge, offensive guard in the first round out of Georgia Tech, who is a massive freight runner, extremely nasty. Brett Veach, his head coach at Georgia Tech, said that he's one of his favorite and the best players that he's ever coached. I expect him to have a massive impact on an improved Houston Texans offensive line. Then they double back in round 2 and got defensive tackle Caden McDonald from Ohio State, who's going to be phenomenal against the run for them. Then I like what they did in day 3. You got USC safety Kamari Ramsey. I thought he should have been a second or third round pick. One of the more underappreciated defensive backs in this draft class. Then you got Indiana linebacker Aiden Fisher, who isn't the best athlete, but he's a very smart player, good instincts. I think that he's pretty good against the run. I could see him becoming a potential starter. I could see him becoming one of, well, I won't say an elite linebacker, but I definitely think that he can be an above average linebacker. Aiden Fisher is just one of those kinds of players that I wouldn't be shocked if he ends up being one of those huge Cinderella underdog round 7 stories that you see. A guy that barely made the roster, barely got drafted, and ends up carving out a very good career as a long-term starter in this league. The Indianapolis Colts, they didn't really have that much draft capital to work with, but I felt they did the most with what they had. I love linebacker C.J. Allen, green dot linebacker for Georgia. He calls the plays. That makes him a day one starter. You got A.J. Holloway from LSU, who is one of the best safeties in college football. Big hitter, isn't going to be afraid to get ejected for a targeting penalty, which is a positive and a negative depending on who you are. Very good ball skills as well. Deion Burks in the 7th round, wide receiver out of Oklahoma. Just a slot guy, but very electric. If you get the ball in his hands out in space, he can make some stuff happen. But more so, I think he's just going to be a very good kick returner, good punt returner for the Indianapolis Colts. The Tennessee Titans, I wanted to give them an A-, but I'm giving them a B+, because Cornell Tate at 4 was definitely a reach, but a tolerable reach. Cam Ward had damn near the worst receiving core in the NFL last year. The only dependable receiver that Cam Ward had to throw to was Alik Ayermanner. That was about it. Cornell Tate, he can be a number 1. I know he wasn't number 1 at Ohio State, but when you're the number 2 to the greatest wide receiver prospect in NFL history, you can't be punished for that. Ohio State is wide receiver you. They got a good track record with wide receivers. Cornell Tate, I liked his film. I just didn't feel he was worth a top 5 or even a top 10 pick. I don't think none of the receivers in this draft were worth a top 10 pick this year. But it's a tolerable reach. Is Cornell Tate going to live up to the expectations that you will have for a guy that gets drafted this high? I don't know. Because if you're drafting a receiver in the top 5, you're telling me that this is a guy that's going to end up being one of the best receivers in the NFL. Top 5, at least top 10 at the bare minimum. I don't see that in Cornell Tate. I see him being more like a Chris Olave. Chris Olave is a solid receiver. But that's the thing. He's a solid receiver. If I'm taking you in the top 5 or top 10, I'm looking for Jamar Chase, Justin Jefferson, Jerry Rice, Calvin Johnson. And Cornell Tate wasn't that kind of receiver prospect. I like him as a mid-round wide receiver. Fameka Ibuka went in the middle round. Then why is Cornell Tate going in the top 5? Because I don't even think that Cornell Tate was better than Emeka Ibuka or even Marvin Harrison Jr. He's not even one of the better receivers that Ohio State has put into the league. So the Titans did kind of reach, but it's understandable because of the desperate need of giving Cam Ward some guys that can catch the freaking football. They got Keldrick Falk in the back end of round 1. Very good against the run. I like his upside. I think he's going to be a pretty solid player for Robert Saleh. I love Anthony Hill Jr., Texas linebacker in round 2. I thought he was a top 20 player in this draft. I felt he should have been a first-round pick. Just an all-around outstanding football player. I was very shocked that the Jaguars passed on him for a tight end, and they let him go to one of their biggest rivals in the division. Nick Singleton had a very promising start to his Penn State career, had a lot of hype coming out of high school as a blue-chip recruit. He was just better off declaring for the draft. When he came back last year, that kind of messed up his draft stock. He definitely would have been drafted in round 2, round 3 if he came out last year. Him coming back was a bad decision, but he's a very good player, very good athlete, has very good twitchiness. He kind of has the skill set of what you expect from a first-round back, but the vision just isn't there. And then you got Indiana Sooner or Indiana center Pat Coogan in the 6th round, who could potentially be a starter for you, one of the better day 3 pickups that any team made. So these are my draft grades for the AFC South. I think that there were a lot of solid drafts in this division, but definitely the Jaguars hold the cake for the worst draft out of any team this year. The AFC West, I gave the Broncos a C+ for their draft this year because they didn't really have too many picks to make. They didn't really have a lot of draft capital, but I do like Jonah Coleman in the 4th round. I felt he was RB3 in this draft behind Jeremiah Love, Jadarian Price, and then it was him. And now some people may say that you like Emmett Johnson a little bit more. Jonah Coleman, very powerful running the ball in between the tackles. He has very good vision. Just isn't that elusive. But with what he's going to do for the Broncos after contact, he could be a very good RB2, a very good spell back if you got a very good workhorse back. Other than that, I wasn't really that high on any of the other picks that the Broncos made. They didn't really need to have a good draft since they already had a good enough team as what it is, especially with the recent trade of Jalen Waddle. So I'm giving them a C+. They just didn't have a lot of picks, and they didn't really get a lot of value with the few picks that they had. The Chargers get a B+. They had 8 picks this year. They used 50% of those picks on improving the offensive line. We were wondering when the offensive line help was going to come for the Chargers after free agency. It has now arrived. I think that Jake Slaughter, a center out of Florida that they got in round 2, is going to be an instant day 1 starter for them, depending on if they want to move on the guard or not. I think Akeem Mestor in the 1st round is going to be a beast for the Chargers. Sure, he's up there in age, and he isn't too many years away from being the same age as what Khalil Mack is, but he's one of those rookies that I expect to come in and have an immediate impact on this Chargers pass rush. I could see him having 7.5, maybe 8.5 sacks in his first year, being a finalist for Defensive Rookie of the Year. The Chiefs had one of the best drafts in the NFL. Brett Veach, who was under a lot of pressure entering this draft, he understood the assignment. The Chiefs, they had a lot of holes on defense, and they drafted 4 starting level players with some of their selections. I liked trading up for Mansour Delane. You can never go wrong drafting the LSU corner high in the draft. He only gave up 14 catches last year throughout the entirety of the regular season, which is insane. And then they double back in the back end of the 1st round. They got that defensive line help that Chiefs fans were looking for, taking interior defensive lineman out of Clemson, Peter Woods, who was a preseason top 5, top 10 consensus pick by most draft experts and analysts. Clemson, with how much of a disappointment last season was for them, Peter Woods, his play kind of fell off because of that also, but the potential definitely is there. I think when you got an interior defensive lineman that has the pass rushing potential that Peter Woods has, he definitely is worth a 1st round pick. R. Mason Thomas was one of my favorite players in the draft this year. I had a late 1st round grade on him. Getting him in round 2 was great value for Kansas City. He was only viewed as a 2nd round pick by most due to his run defense not really being that great, but it doesn't really matter for Kansas City, because what R. Mason Thomas does the best is what Kansas City needs the most, which is somebody that can actually get after the quarterback, not named Chris Jones. And R. Mason Thomas, he's one of those good situational pass rushers that you can throw out on obvious passing downs, and he can give you like 5-6 sacks as a rookie. He can turn into a possible 9 sack per year guy for Kansas City. Then in round 2, you got Oregon corner Jaden Kennedy, who I felt was pretty solid, fits the Steve Spagnuolo scheme pretty well. Then you got running back Emmett Johnson in round 4. Emmett Johnson is going to be a perfect complementary back to Kenneth Walker. Great vision, phenomenal burst. I love Emmett Johnson's game. He was the best part of Nebraska's offense last year, pretty much the heart and soul of their team in 2025. I'm giving the Raiders a B- for their draft. I was a little bit disappointed in the lack of investment that the Raiders put into the offensive line this year. They only drafted 1 offensive lineman. Now, they obviously came into the draft prioritizing improving their secondary, which they did that, trading Stoops from Arizona, one of the best kept secrets in the draft this year as far as safeties go. He's a baller. Then you got Jamal McCoy, who would have been probably the first corner taken off the board this year over Mansour Delane if he never had that ACL injury at the start of last year when he was training during the offseason. I was shocked that he fell as far as what he did in spite of how well he tested at the pro day. But, hey, the rest of the league sleeping on Jamal McCoy is going to be a gift for the Raiders, since he could end up being the best corner that they've had since a very long time. I can't remember the last time the Raiders had an elite corner. I like running back Mike Washington Jr. in the 4th round. He's going to be a good backup to spell Ashton Jeanty. He fits that Clint Kubiak outside zone run scheme very well. So these are my complete draft grades for the entire AFC. Now for the NFC. Starting off with the NFC North, the Chicago Bears had a pretty solid draft. I gave them a B. Dylan Thielman in the 1st round was a great pick. He's a certified baller. What made me sold on Dylan Thielman was just how good he is at just having an understanding of how to bait quarterbacks, how to fool quarterbacks. He had a game-winning interception on Drew Aller when Oregon played Penn State in that game, which was an instant classic where he pretty much user lurked. Drew Aller, you know how you user the middle of the field in Madden and you just lurk people? That's pretty much how Dylan Thielman fooled and picked off Drew Aller at the end of that Penn State-Oregon game, and that's the play that just completely sold me on him. Then you got cornerback Malik Muhammad in round 4. He has a slim build, but he is very good in coverage, kind of a little bit like Colton Hood from a playing style standpoint. So Dylan Thielman, Malik Muhammad, both of those guys, I expect them to get significant playing time in year 1 for the Bears. Outside of those 2 players, I wasn't really that excited for the other moves that they made in the draft, but I think that these are the 2 best moves that the Bears made since they completely improved their secondary. I'm giving the Packers a C+ because they didn't have that much capital. They had limited capital, but they did walk away with Brandon Cece from South Carolina, cornerback. I think that he can start day 1 for Green Bay. For some reason, South Carolina just has a habit of developing these super freakishly gifted corners that are very good in like zone heavy schemes. I think he'll be a good fit for the kind of style of defense that Jonathan Gannon is going to be running there. One of the biggest steals of the draft the Packers made, getting Penn State edge rusher denied Dennis Sutton in round 4. High upside. He was viewed as a round 1 guy before this season started. I thought that he still had a pretty good season last year. He possibly could start for the Packers day 1, depending on how he does in minicamp and training camp. I don't think he's Abdul Carter, but I do think that athleticism is there. The bend is there. Everything that you're looking for in like a high upside pass rusher is there for the night. Dennis Sutton. He could be one of the biggest steals from this draft 3-4 years from now when we're looking back on this draft class. The Minnesota Vikings had a solid draft. I give it a B. I loved the selection of Caleb Banks at 18th overall in the 1st round. If Caleb Banks stays healthy, he's going to be an all-pro caliber player for the Minnesota Vikings. Caleb Banks, if he didn't have the foot injuries, he was a top 10 player in this draft, in my opinion. Very disruptive, getting after the quarterback. When you have an interior defensive lineman that can rush the quarterback as well as what Caleb Banks has the potential to, that's worth a top 10 investment. The Vikings got this dude in the middle of the 1st round. The only concern is the injuries, especially the foot injuries, because you don't want to have lower body injury concerns for anybody that's playing on the line of scrimmage, especially defensive tackle. But if he can hold up, Caleb Banks is going to be a damn good defensive tackle, one of the best in the NFL. The Vikings also did a good job of addressing the entirety of their front 7. They walked away with a few other good front 7 players. I think that safety Jacoby Thomas out of Miami will be another sleeper for them in round 3. You can't go wrong drafting anybody from Miami. Miami had so many dogs, especially on that defense last year. If you got a need and you got to fill it, just go ahead and take a Miami player. There were a lot of dogs, a lot of good players off that defense last season. The Detroit Lions get a B- for me. I like Blake Miller with their 1st round selection at right tackle. He's going to be a solid pickup for them. You're moving Penei Sewell to left tackle with some of the changes, the shakeup you've had on the offensive line this offseason. Blake Miller was definitely a necessity. Plug-and-play guy. Offensive line is in check. Derek Moore, second-round pick, pass rusher out of Michigan. Very strong, very powerful. More so just a good bull rusher. Doesn't really have a lot of finesse in his game, but that's okay. Like, as long as Derek Moore can give Aiden Hutchinson a little bit of help on that other side, he can give him like 6-7 sacks. That's all you're asking for if you're Brad Holmes. Jimmy Roller is very interesting. The linebacker out of Michigan in round 4. Detroit, the Lions, they love these Michigan players. No surprise with the close proximity they have to the University of Michigan, while they took a good amount of Michigan players. But he's a good tackler, just has 1 year as a starter. So you just wonder, with the lack of experience he has, how long that's going to affect him seeing the field. Is he just going to be a special teams guy? They got a very good cornerback that I like out of Arizona State, and Keith Abney II. Very feisty, aggressive boundary corner. The only issue with him is he can be a little bit too handsy at times. So if you can work on that, make him a little bit more disciplined, where he trusts his feet and his footwork a little bit more than his hands, he could be pretty good for the Detroit Lions. The Philadelphia Eagles. I don't think their draft is as good as what a lot of people are making it out to be. Not to say that their draft wasn't good, but it's a little bit overrated in a sense. Now, they definitely made one of the best moves of the draft, trading up to the 20th pick with their biggest option in the division, the Dallas Cowboys, to get Mekhi Lemon. Mekhi Lemon was my wide receiver 1 this year. I thought he was better than Cornell Tate and Jordan Tyson, just because the floor is so high and the ceiling is just as high. His comp is kind of a blend of JSN and Amon-Ra St. Brown. He's well built. He's a little bit undersized. He's like 5'10", but he's 192 pounds, so he's built like a running back, and he primarily played on the perimeter for USC. So he's not just one of those, he's a slot guy. No, he can actually play on the outside and in the slot. With how well he runs his routes, I didn't really see too many issues with Mekhi Lemon struggling to beat press coverage. I don't know why people keep saying that, but I keep seeing that a lot. I felt this was the best replacement in the draft that the Eagles could have gotten for A.J. Brown. I think that Mekhi Lemon can easily come in, give them 1,000+ receiving yards, depending on how functional Jalen Hurts is going to be this year. Eli Stowers in round 2, outside of Kenyon Sadiq, Eli Stowers was the second most athletically gifted tight end in this class. I don't really know how his game is going to translate to the league. It just kind of depends on the scheme. Some feel like he's more of a fullback, edge-back type. Some feel that he could play receiver. He should just switch to receiver full time. When you have somebody that has the kind of unique skill set that Eli Stowers has, it's better used as a tight end, since you can just get more out of a guy playing tight end with the skill set that Eli Stowers has than just playing receiver, since tight ends, when they can be a mismatch with the athleticism, what they can do in the pass game, running routes, catching the football, it's a lot more difficult for defenders to defend against versus you just putting them on the outside against corners that are more athletic. You kind of take away the appeal of a Eli Stowers with the matchups. So I think that the Eagles draft was pretty good. It wasn't great. I didn't see a lot of potential starters down the road from this draft class. Markel Bell, Miami offensive tackle that they got in round 4, is a massive human being. Maybe he down the line could end up starting at one of those tackle spots. Maybe if Lane Johnson ends up having an injury or he ends up retiring out of nowhere, he's the next man up to fill that mantle. I gave the Dallas Cowboys a B+. I felt their draft was very good. Caleb Downs at 11 was one of the biggest steals of the draft. Caleb Downs was the dream for the Cowboys this year. The Cowboys wanted either Sonny Styles or Caleb Downs. They got one of the guys that they really wanted, and they didn't even have to trade up the farm to get him. Caleb Downs is immediately going to transform that Dallas Cowboys defense. He can just play everywhere, from linebacker to in the slot to single high to high safety. Very smart player. phenomenal athlete. This dude was a blue chip player when he first stepped foot at 18 years old as a true freshman, fresh out of high school, and started for Nick Saban and was the captain of his defense, and then proceeded to do the same thing at Ohio State. He's been an All-American for every year that he started in college, which is 3. So if you're a 3-time All-American, yeah, you're going to be a stud. You're something special. I see Derwin James 2.0 and Caleb Downs. And I get it that Caleb Downs wants to be Caleb Downs, but we do compare these guys, what they will look like on the high end. And I think the high-end comp for Caleb Downs is Derwin James. The Cowboys also drafted a lot of pass rush help. They drafted 3 pass rushers in this class. The 2 ones I like the most, Malachi Lawrence out of UCF in the first round, more so of a late riser during the draft process. He more so started to rise up draft boards with how well he tested during the draft process. Has a very good first step, very explosive off the snap. He's one of those guys that as soon as the ball gets snapped, he immediately could be in the backfield harassing the quarterback. I like LT Overton in round 4, another Alabama player that had a lot of hype coming out of high school and just didn't live up to the potential. I don't think that LT Overton has played his best football yet. In the NFL, he could be much better with the Cowboys than what he ever was for Alabama. The Washington Commanders, I like this draft. I don't love it, but I mainly like this draft because they landed Sonny Styles. Sonny Styles is going to be a future All-Pro, and he's going to be one of the best defensive players in the NFL over the next decade. You don't find guys built like Sonny Styles every day. This dude is built like he came fresh out of a football factory. He's like 6'5", 240-something pounds. It runs in the 4.4. When you have this kind of athleticism at linebacker, you play the run as well as what he does, but you're just eraser against the pass. Sonny Styles is a cheat code at linebacker. He's like the equivalent to putting the fastest linebacker you have as your user in Madden. He can guard slot wide receivers, tight ends, running backs. This guy's just a monster. I think that Sonny Styles is going to be a trailblazer for what teams are now going to be looking for out of the linebackers in the foreseeable future, because Sonny Styles is the new modern linebacker. He started out as a safety, which is kind of why he has the coverage ability that he has. The Commanders, they had so many issues on defense. The only way you could fix it was by drafting a guy like Sonny Styles, who pretty much can't kill 2 birds with 1 stone. Great against the run, phenomenal against the pass. Sonny Styles was my number 1 player in this draft on my draft board. I felt that out of all the players in this draft, he's going to be the one that ends up having the best career. It's just the physical traits, the IQ, the ability to just completely erase the middle of the field and pass coverage from that linebacker spot. I think it's a huge trait that a lot of teams were kind of undervaluing. I felt he could have been the 2nd pick of the draft if you ask me. Then you got Kaytron Allen in the 6th round. He's a stud. Great vision, elite burst. Maybe Kaytron Allen ends up becoming the Commanders' RB1. You were hoping to get Jeremiah Love, but Kaytron Allen could end up being the running back that the Commanders have been looking for to complement Nikosi Merritt. So I think the Commanders had a good draft. Not a lot of picks, but getting Sonny Styles, you definitely get a lot of brownie points from me for that. The New York Giants, I'm not going to give them an A like how a lot of the consensus is. They had a good draft. Not a great draft, though, because it could have been a lot better. I'm giving them a B+. I don't feel like Sonny Styles and Caleb Downs should have been passed on by the Giants. I do understand that the game is won and lost on the line of scrimmage. You don't have to preach that to me. There's nobody that preaches the line of scrimmage more than me. I understand that. My problem with the Giants' first 2 selections in this draft is that, for one, Sonny Styles was a much better linebacker than Arvell Reese, which is primarily what Arvell Reese is going to be playing for the Giants. They say they're going to be playing him at will. You could have played Sonny Styles at will. Sonny Styles is a much better linebacker prospect than what Arvell Reese is. Now, who has the higher ceiling? Who has more potential? it really doesn't matter. Sonny Styles' potential is limitless. This dude is 6'5", 240-something pounds, running 4'4" something at linebacker. Don't try to sell me the dream that Arvell Reed's potential is higher than Sonny Styles when both of these guys are freaks. It's just that the thing with Arvell Reed wasn't the potential. What scared me about Arvell Reed was the floor, which is very, very low. The floor for Arvell Reed is he's not even a starter 3-4 years from now. He's Isaiah Simmons. He's bouncing around practice squads because you can never really get him comfortable at linebacker. You can never really get him comfortable at edge. You really couldn't really figure out how to utilize him the right way. And also, if you're going to play him primarily as an off-ball linebacker, I still felt like Sonny Styles was the better of the two. And even if you disagree with that, you could have at least drafted Caleb Downs. This is why I felt the Giants squandered a big opportunity in the first round this year. You passed on the two best players in the draft, which I know it's everybody's opinion, but Sonny Styles and Caleb Downs, to me, were 1 and 2 the best players coming out of the draft this year. And you could have walked through with both of those guys, and I felt you would have had a much better team with how good you were going to be on the defensive side of the ball with these two future all-pro players that just have so much versatility. They can do so much with your defense. But I understand. You got to prioritize the line of scrimmage, but Arvell Reed is playing linebacker, not edge. So I wasn't necessarily saying he's improving the line of scrimmage, which is why I felt if you primarily were going to play Arvell Reed as an all-ball linebacker, you should have just went with Sonny Styles. I don't have an issue with Francis Margoa. You're going to be playing him at right guard. That's going to be cool. So you got a really good offensive line. It's just I felt the Giants would be a much better team with Sonny Styles and Caleb Downs than what they are with Arvell Reed and Francis Margoa being their first two picks. I do like the selection of Colton Hood in the second round, one of my favorite corners in this draft. Very good in man coverage, very aggressive, very physical, a little bit too physical at times, gets him in some penalty trouble from time to time. Ultimately, I think Colton Hood is going to be an instant day one starter for the Giants. He's going to be very good. Malachi Fields in round 3, Notre Dame wide receiver. I'm going to be honest, that's kind of when the New York Giants started to lose me. The Giants, it's one thing to draft a receiver in round 3. Drafting a Notre Dame receiver, though, especially one that wasn't really all that productive at that, you lost me there. Now, don't sleep on Jack Kelly, who the Giants got in round 6 out of BYU. I had a third-round grade on Jack Kelly. I thought that he wasn't the best athlete, but he was always in the right spot. I think that he's a pretty good run defender also. I felt he could have went a lot higher than round 6. So getting him at round 6 was good value. Overall, the Giants draft was good because of the value that they got, where they picked these guys at. They drafted guys that were expected to be drafted a lot higher than where their actual draft positioning was. And that's why I felt the Giants had a B-plus draft, just not an A- because I still felt like they could have been a much better team than what they currently are right now if they just went with Sonny Styles at 5 and Caleb Downs at 10. The NFC South, for the most part, this division had some really good drafts. Probably out of all the divisions, the NFC South had the best draft as a whole. The Carolina Panthers, they drafted what should be 3 future solid starters on the line of scrimmage, which is why I'm giving them a B+. They got Monroe Freeland, very good offensive tackle from the University of Georgia, great size, a physical specimen, just not ready to start day one for Carolina. But if they got to throw him out there, I think he'll be all right. Then you got Texas Tech defensive tackle Lee Hunter, who was one of my favorite players coming out of this draft. One of the best, if not the best, run-stopping defensive tackle in this class, depending on who you ask. Some people may prefer the Ohio State defensive tackle over Lee Hunter a little bit more, but Lee Hunter could be a good rotational guy for them, a good short yardage package guy for them. And when you're lining up next to Derek Brown, that also doesn't do anything but help you also. Then they got a very good center that could start for them possibly down the road, and Sam Heck in round 5 out of Kansas State. I think that the biggest thing with the Panthers draft, my biggest takeaway from this is they got some real competition for their wide receiver 2 spot with the selection of Chris Brazil in round 3. He comes from Tennessee. I know that Tennessee runs that very annoying ass offense that most that come from it don't do anything in the NFL. Chris Brazil might be the first Tennessee receiver under Josh Heupel to actually make some noise in the NFL. This guy is 6'4" and runs 4.37. Goodbye, Xavier Legette. Him and Ted McMillan are going to be a problem. You got two very big and physical receivers, but you got a guy in Chris Brazil who runs 4.37. That on the opposite side of Ted McMillan, along with my guy Jimmy Horn Jr. in the slot, Jalen Coker in the slot. The Panthers receiving core is low-key underrated. It's not one of the best in the NFL, but if I was to rank the 10 best receiving rooms in the NFL, the Panthers would be on that list just because of the sheer amount of depth that they have at that position. The Buccaneers, I gave them an A- for their draft. They drafted 2 dogs from Miami. So if you get 2 dogs from Miami, you got to get an A-. That's why the Buccaneers have one of the best general managers in the NFL. Jason Light, he doesn't overthink it. It was simple. If you need some dogs on defense, which was their biggest issue last year, just draft Ruben Bain in the first round and just go ahead and get Keontae Scott in round 4. Ruben Bain, he's going to be a definite dog for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Ruben Bain, you know how you know he's going to be a dog for Tampa Bay? Because when he got drafted, that boy was angry. You know how all the draft prospects were going out before they went up to the podium to get their jersey, shake hands with the commissioner. They were posing with their hat. Ruben Bain said, F all that. I ain't here to look cute. I ain't here to pose no cap. I'm here for straight business. Y'all boys got me bent. I was expected to be a top 10 pick, and my draft stock ended up falling because of some off-the-field stuff that I didn't get found guilty of. But that's okay. He fell to where he was needed the most on the Buccaneers. Ruben Bain is going to instantly give the Buccaneers 9.5 sacks. That's if the arm length truly doesn't hold them back. It's not as big as a hindrance as what people make it out to be. I think if you turn on the tape for Ruben Bain, he's just a damn good football player. And with how angry Ruben Bain was looking, not wanting to pose with that damn hat, that told me everything I needed to know about the kind of career that Ruben Bain is going to have for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. You got Keontae Johnson in round 4, who's a very good slot cornerback. He's a real hitter. You talk about defensive backs not liking to tackle, not liking to get physical. Keontae Scott isn't one of those guys. He has no problem coming down and tackling anybody. This is the kind of corner that will have no problem putting his career on the line to tackle Derrick Henry on 4th and goal with the season on the line. Keontae Scott is just one of those guys that plays with a lot of energy, a lot of passion. You could tell that with how the Buccaneers drafted, they were looking to add some violence on that defense. Linebacker Jeremiah Trotter, who comes from NFL bloodlines, he got drafted in round 2. I had a day 1 grade on him. He's a day 1 starter. Could be a potential instant plug-and-place replacement for Levante David. He's a good tackler, plays very fast and aggressive. I gave the Buccaneers an A- for this drive class this year due to just the amount of aggression and violence that they've added on the defensive side of the football. And I expect a lot of these guys that they drafted on defense to be fucking some people up next season coming up. The Falcons, this is one of those drives that I'm a lot higher on than the consensus. I'm giving them a B. You had one of the best drive picks of this year by drafting A.J. Terrell's little brother, Avion Terrell, who should have been drafted in the first round. I don't know why Avion Terrell fell to round 2, but he was one of the best corners in college football, one of the best man-to-man corners coming out of this draft, in my opinion. Very good man coverage, doesn't really have a lot of pass interference penalties that a lot of these defensive backs tend to have. I felt that the pairing of A.J. Terrell and Avion Terrell is why the Falcons had a good draft. And the 2 Terrell brothers are going to be putting the league on lock for the next few years, along with Billy Bowman, Jesse Bates, Xavier Watts. The Falcons got a very nice defense. Literally, the only thing they kind of needed was a corner, and they got that drafting A.J. Terrell's little brother. Can't wait to talk about how the Terrell brothers are going to be clamping up the league. Zachariah Branch in round 3, I love it. Elite playmaker. It's not going to be complicated to figure out how to get Zachariah Branch going if you're Kevin Stefanski. Just give this brother the damn ball in space and let the boy go to work. Zachariah Branch is very fast, but he's more quick than he is fast. He's just very shifty. He has very crazy change of direction. He can change direction on a dime. And when you see Zachariah Branch in the open field, he's very hard to bring down. Not because of his size. He is undersized. He's only like 5'8", 5'9", but because of how explosive and how quick this guy is. It's not complicated to get Zachariah Branch going. You throw him a bubble screen, do a jet sweep, something. Just get the brother the ball and let him work in the open field. That's how you get the most out of Zachariah Branch. Then you got Harold Perkins in round 6, who is a great value brand version, essentially, of Arvell Reese. Now, Harold Perkins, why he has so much hype despite being a 6th-round pick is due to how phenomenal his true freshman season at LSU was. When he bursted onto the scene at LSU, he looked like the next best thing. He looked like he was going to be like a Nick Bosa, a Michael Parsons kind of player, but then injuries kind of held him back. He changed his position from edge to being more of an off-ball linebacker, so he has some versatility in his game. It's just that he's not as big or athletic as what Arvell Reese is, not as violent, and it's going to be interesting to see how the Falcons are going to deploy Harold Perkins, because he was much more productive when he was rushing off the edge, but you're not about to put a guy that's like 220-something pounds on the edge when you're going up against like 300-pound offensive tackles. So I really don't know how the Falcons plan on using Harold Perkins. The New Orleans Saints had the 3rd best draft class coming out of this draft this year. They added a lot of explosiveness on offense. They added explosiveness and speed at receiver. Not only did you get Jordan Tyson, probably the most explosive receiver in this class this year with the highest upside, but you got another receiver in round 4 that has a lot of similarities in his game to Jordan Tyson and Bryce Lance. If that last name sounds familiar to you, yes, Bryce Lance is the younger brother of former top 5 pick Trey Lance. And like Jordan Tyson, very explosive. Both Bryce Lance and Jordan Tyson just do a very good job of winning above the rim. They just have bunnies for days. They look like they could jump out the freaking stadium. They look like they could jump out of the Superdome, if you ask me. 50-50 balls to Jordan Tyson and Bryce Lance from Tyler Shuck. I don't see too many of those connections being stopped. You also got Oscar Delp, a Georgia tight end in the 3rd round, who is a very good pass catcher, who has very good fluidity and runs very well for his size. I think he could start week 1 for the Saints because he only has to beat out Jawan Johnson and Noah Fant. And he kind of is like a diet version, if you want to call him that, of Brock Bowers. You could play him in the slot a little bit, kind of moves like Brock Bowers. Doesn't move as well as what Brock Bowers does, but he's not too far off. And then Lorenzo Styles, the brother of Sonny Styles, both of these guys are freak. They just look like they can destroy a weight room. Like, if you saw Lorenzo Styles and Sonny Styles in the weight room, you're kind of like, what the hell are you guys? Are you Captain America? Are you superhumans? So I felt the Saints had the 3rd or 4th best draft in the NFL this year. And then lastly, we got the NFC West. The NFC West had the worst draft as a whole out of all the divisions. Now, the Seahawks, I gave them a B+. Drafting Jadarian Price in round 1 was a little bit of a reach, but I'll tolerate it. It's justified to me just because Kenneth Walker is gone. You don't really have any big needs, so you could afford to reach for Jadarian Price. And Jadarian Price was a pretty good bag. It's got the RB2 in the back end of round 1. know about that, but since Kenneth Walker is gone, there's not a lot of other good replacements out there for Kenneth Walker. I'll give the Seahawks a pass for drafting Jadarian Price in the back end of the first round. Now, they got a lot of versatile defensive backs. You know how Nick Imawari became a household name with his versatility? Well, Mike McDonald and their general manager, they doubled down on that. They got even more Nick Imawari clones. You have Bud Clark, who you drafted in the second round, safety out of TCU. He can play in the slot, plays man coverage out of the slot very well. He could play some safety also. It's just however you want to use him. If you want to use him as a safety, you can do that. If you want to use him more as a slot player near the line of scrimmage, he could be really good in that role as well. I think he's very good against slot receivers. You got Julian Neal and Andre Fuller, two corners that you got in the later round. Julian Neal, you got him in round 3. You got Andre Fuller in round 7. These are some very impressive corners. Not only are they both 6 foot plus, but they also are 200 plus as well. And they both somehow managed to run 4.49. So you got two tall, very long and strong 200 plus pound corners that run 4.49. So it's pretty obvious that Mike McDonald is trying to double down on Nick Imawari and is trying to find a lot more of those guys. Then you got offensive guard Bo Steven out of Iowa in round 5, who could become a pretty solid spot starter for the Seahawks in the foreseeable future. The Rams draft was not as bad as what people make it out to be. I'm giving them a C. It wasn't the best, but Ty Simpson made sense. He is a win now, later move for the Rams. He helps the Rams continue to dominate after Matthew Stafford retires. And the best franchises always have a good succession plan at quarterback. So I'm not finna punish the Rams for getting their future quarterback figured out after Matthew Stafford. Now, I don't like the selection of Max Clare, tight end out of Ohio State in round 2, because it's like the Rams already have a bunch of tight ends. How many damn tight ends do you need? It's like they got like a million of them on the roster. Sean McVay stacking up these tight ends like they're infinity stones. Like, come on, Sean McVay. You don't need all these doggone tight ends. I know that you run a lot of 11 and 12 personnel, but damn, you got like 20 tight ends on the roster right now. I do love Missouri offensive tackle Keegan Tross. You talk about a mammoth of a man. Keegan Tross, I think he could be a serviceable offensive tackle, but if not, he definitely could eventually be a very good offensive guard for them. And then one of my favorite sleeper picks of the draft, the Rams got Miami wide receiver C.J. Daniels in the 6th round. Overhated for no reason. Sure, he's not an explosive athlete. He may not be the greatest getting off the line, but he runs good routes. He gets open, has good hands. He's not that fast and has some durability concerns, but to get a guy like C.J. Daniels that can just get open, that just is a smooth and fluid receiver, I feel it's a steal. And he's a guy that I can see sticking around. Out of all the receivers that have gone in the 6th round and later this year, I feel like C.J. Daniels has a above average shot of making the roster and being somewhat of a future starter for the Rams. I like C.J. Daniels. Am I a little bit biased as a Miami fan? Yeah, but I've always felt like C.J. Daniels has been a pretty good receiver, dating back from his time when he was playing at LSU. The 49ers, which we're going to talk about them later on this episode, which is already going on pretty long, but the 49ers, I'm giving them a B. They have a strong draft that adds a lot of injury insurance on defense, since injuries have been the Achilles heel of the 49ers for the last few seasons. You add edge rusher Melo Height, who I felt was one of the better edge rushers in this class. He's undersized, but has a high motor, very good against the pass. His run defense is also pretty good. They got Physicist Prescott, who is a huge, massive press man-to-man corner in the 4th round. You got Oklahoma defensive tackle Grayson Holton, who's undersized, but he's very quick. He'll be very good on stunts. He'll be very good in 3rd down situations when you're looking for a situational pass rusher on the interior. That's pretty much what his specialty is. His speed, even though he's undersized, allows him to be a lot more productive generating pressure after the quarterback. I think that Deshaun dribbling in round 2 is a little bit of a reach, but the 49ers seem to love these long, rangy receivers, kind of like a Jawan Jennings, but a lot more faster. He can also win contested catches as well. They drafted another running back. Like how Sean McVay keeps drafting these tight ends like they're infinity stones. Kyle Shanahan and John Lynch keep drafting these doggone running backs, saving them like they're infinity stones. I don't know how many running backs the 49ers have drafted now, but it seems like they at least got about 20 running backs on the roster right now. Like Isaac Orlando was good. Like Brian Robinson was good. How many doggone running backs do you need, man? Like one thing that's guaranteed in life, death, taxes, and Kyle Shanahan and John Lynch drafting them a doggone running back, man. They already got like 1 million of them. How many more doggone running backs do you need? Are you trying to keep the other teams from drafting running backs? Because if that's your strategy, it might be a little bit smart. No. And then lastly, I got the Arizona Cardinals. Even though they drafted a running back with a 3rd overall pick, made him pretty much the highest paid running back ever doing this, the pick makes sense to me. Who's playing quarterback for the Arizona Cardinals this upcoming season? Jacoby Brissett? Gardner Minshew? Carson Beck? Yeah, run that rock. You want to get Jeremiah Love and James Conner as many touches as possible, especially James Conner with especially with James Conner coming off once again another season-ending injury at the age of 30 when running backs start to decline. That's why they signed Tyler Algier. So when James Conner inevitably gets injured like he always does, then Tyler Algier is going to come in. Then you're going to have the two-headed attack of Jeremiah Love and Tyler Algier. And the Arizona Cardinals know their quarterback play won't be that great this year. So you might as well just run the air out of the football, throw the football as least amount of times as possible, since you already got a pretty good offense. You got some good skill position players. You got some very good wide receivers, a very good tight end, and now you add Jeremiah Love to the fold. So when you do end up drafting a quarterback next year, a much better one than Carson Beck, that guy is much suited for instant success than what he would be if you didn't have a guy like Jeremiah Love. Because when you got the kind of issues that the Cardinals have, there's nothing wrong with going best player available. So that's why I'm not really harping too much on their decision to draft Jeremiah Love 3rd overall, even though it kind of did surprise me. But there were a lot of things in the top 10 of the draft that surprised me. That pick kind of just started it. You had him at 3, then Cornell Tate at 4, then Arvell Reese at 5. I was kind of like, what the hell is going on in this draft, man? We taking a running back and receiver, went back-to-back in the top 5. Wow. But this is it for my 2026 NFL draft grades. Let me know your draft grades for all 32 teams down in the comment section down below. I know this thing was very long. I promise you I didn't anticipate it being an hour and 30 minutes getting into this thing. And we still have a lot more things to talk about on tonight's episode. If you haven't already, if you're new, smash that like button, subscribe to the channel, hit that bell icon so you don't miss when we drop content. We're talking all things football, NFL, college football, 24/7, 365 days throughout the year. So if you're a football junkie like me, make sure you hit that bell icon so you can get your daily football fix in. You can find us at JT Sports _ on Instagram, X, and TikTok. We post bonus content, updates, alerts about the pod. We interact with you guys in the DMs. We answer questions. We do mailbag episodes from the DM. So go ahead, give us a follow at JT Sports _ is where you can find us on TikTok, X, and Instagram. Also, give the podcast a 5-star review. We are not just a YouTube channel. We are a podcast. You can find this episode along with all of our previous ones in audio format on all podcasting platforms, Apple, Spotify, Amazon Podcasts. Just go ahead, type in JT Sports on whichever podcasting service you use, and it'll pop up. Or you can go to the link in the description, and that will send you directly to the Apple and Spotify versions of the pod. And then join our Discord server. If you're one of those people that just enjoy talking football at all types of the day, you wake up middle of the night, 2 o'clock, you're just trying to talk some football, Go ahead and join the JT Sports Discord. We're up at all types of the day, just talking football 24/7. Go ahead, join the JT Sports Discord. The link is also in the description as well. And the show isn't over, people. I know it's 12 o'clock. We started this thing at 10:30. We still have a lot of things to talk about, so buckle up. We're not done. We're just getting started. That's what they love to say. Shout out to the chat. Shout out to Darrell Turner 671. Shout out to King Trend TTV. Shout out to Chisley 7863. Shout out to Ice White 22. Shout out to Aaron 11 JS2. Shout out to my midnight game. Shout out to everybody that's tuned in at midnight. We're still going strong. We're nearly an hour and a half in, and we're still not slowing down, man. We still got a lot of takes to get off. And this is one that I've been thinking on for a little bit, right? Everybody is killing the Rams for their decision to draft Ty Simpson with the 13th overall pick. And I get it. Was it a reach? Absolutely. I'm not going to deny that. Ty Simpson was not the 13th best player in the draft. And there definitely were better players that would have given the Rams a better shot at winning the Super Bowl this year than what Ty Simpson does, since Ty Simpson isn't going to be an impact at the Rams at all when it comes to the Rams winning the Super Bowl, unless, God forbid, Matthew Stafford gets injured. You could have easily went with Kenyon Sadiq, Mekhi Lemon, Ruben Bain. There were a lot of good players on the board at 13 that the Rams passed on that could have helped them increase their chances winning the Super Bowl this year. But instead, they prioritize winning later by reaching for Ty Simpson. And there's a difference between a reach and a bad pick. Some guys can still be good players even though they were reaches. And that's going to be Ty Simpson. The Rams didn't draft Ty Simpson for instant gratification. You got everybody that keeps asking, why draft Ty Simpson when he doesn't help you win now? Ty Simpson helps the Rams win now, later. Think about it. You don't have to draft a quarterback that can instantly win you a Super Bowl for him to be a win now move. The Rams are already in win now mode. They already have one of the best rosters in the NFL. So drafting a guy like Ty Simpson to set yourself up for still being able to continue to win and still keep your Super Bowl window open post Matthew Stafford is a good move. Great franchises, they don't wait till the last minute to figure out who their long-term successor is going to be at quarterback. Look at the transition that the Packers have gone through at quarterback over the past 3 decades. It's been one of the most seamless quarterback transitions in NFL history. They went from Brett Favre to Aaron Rodgers. They drafted Aaron Rodgers when Brett Favre was still in his prime, when he still was in his peak. And then when Aaron Rodgers won MVP, what did they do? They drafted Jordan Love. And Jordan Love has since then been one of the better starting quarterbacks in the NFL. The Rams are doing the same exact thing that the Packers have done for going on 3 years now when it comes to grooming their future starter at quarterback. Ty Simpson, despite him only starting 15 college games, doesn't hurt how good he's going to be in the NFL, because Ty Simpson isn't starting this year. So his inexperience doesn't matter. Your inexperience doesn't matter when you're going to be redshirting for 2-3 years, learning behind Matthew Stafford and mastering Sean McVay's scheme. Ty Simpson went to the best situation that any young quarterback could go to. It's funny how people always complain about how teams don't give quarterbacks time to develop anymore. Teams aren't patient enough to allow a young quarterback to develop. But yet, the Rams drafted Ty Simpson 13th overall with the emphasis of developing him for him to take over for Matthew Stafford 2-3 years from now. But everybody hates the pick because the Rams are supposed to be in win now mode, and them trying to win now in the future is a bad decision. I would never underestimate a quarterback that is going to be learning from one of the best offensive minds in the NFL history, sitting on the bench alongside of a future first ballot Hall of Famer in Matthew Stafford. Sean McVay, he wanted Ty Simpson. He wouldn't have just been okay with Les Snead putting in that drive card with Ty Simpson's name on it if he somewhat didn't already like Ty Simpson a little bit. Sean McVay and Les Snead have had too much success together for Les Snead to just overrule Sean McVay, especially with the 13th overall pick. Sean McVay, it's just too good of a coach for him not to have just a little bit of an input on the Rams drafting Ty Simpson. Why does Sean McVay like Ty Simpson? He's not a flashy quarterback like Lamar, Mahomes, or Josh Allen. So what's so appealing about Ty Simpson to Sean McVay? That's the point. He's not flashy. He gets the job done. Kyle Shanahan, Sean McVay, Kevin O'Connell. You know who one of their favorite quarterbacks were? Kirk Cousins. Why is that? Kirk Cousins isn't flashy. He doesn't run it like Lamar. He doesn't have the arm that Josh Allen or Mahomes does. So why do people love Kirk Cousins? Or why did people love Kirk Cousins so much to where he's one of the most profitable NFL players ever? Because Kirk Cousins is the ultimate system quarterback. He's 1, 2, 3, get the ball out. He's not going to improvise. He's not going to try to make things happen off script. He simply just executes the offense. And that's what Ty Simpson does. He's a very good point guard. Ty Simpson, at his best, will be a top 10 quarterback in this league. He will be a better version of what Brock Purdy is. Because when you put a guy like Ty Simpson into a Sean McVay offense, along with all of the talent that he has around him, while Ty Simpson may not be a top 10 quarterback talent-wise, Sean McVay's coaching and the great situation that he's going to be in is going to make Ty Simpson a top 10 quarterback. He's going to look a lot better than what he actually is because the situation around him is going to elevate him. And that's what good franchises do. They build around their quarterback and they help elevate their quarterback. Sean McVay doesn't need for Ty Simpson to be Josh Allen or Lamar. They just need for Ty Simpson to be a top 15 or better quarterback, and they can win with that. Because Ty Simpson, being on his rookie contract, is the hidden win that the Rams got when they drafted Ty Simpson 13th overall. Drafting Ty Simpson 13th overall allows the Rams, when Matthew Stafford retires, to still be able to keep some of their best young players like a Jared Verse, a Puka Nacua, when you have to re-up on Kyron Williams. Because since Ty Simpson's going to be on his rookie deal, you're not going to be paying a lot of your salary cap money to your quarterback. So you're going to have a lot more money freed up to further continue to improve the team to where it's even better, to where maybe Ty Simpson doesn't even have to be a top 15 quarterback. Maybe he can just be a good game manager, hand the football off a lot, throw the football 18, 19 times, and that can still win you a Super Bowl because the overall team around him is so great that he just has to be Jamarcus Russell, Johnny Manziel levels of bad for him not to be able to win you another ship post Stafford. I agree that there were better players that the Rams could have drafted over Ty Simpson 13th overall. But there was no rookie at 13 that was guaranteeing the Rams were going to win the Super Bowl. If the Rams win the Super Bowl a year from now, there wasn't going to be a player that they were going to look back on and point and say, yeah, like, you're the reason why we're in this game. We never would have gotten here if it wasn't for you. I get it. Mekhi Lemon would have been a great slot receiver, instant replacement for Devontae Adams when he ends up retiring eventually. Kenyon Sadiq would have been a very good addition to this Rams offense. But there was no rookie 13th overall that the Rams were going to get over Ty Simpson that was guaranteed to be the reason why the Rams do or don't win the Super Bowl this year. Most rookies don't end up being the difference between a team winning or losing the Super Bowl. So what rookie at 13 was guaranteed to help the Rams get over the hump? Nobody. That's why I don't hate the Ty Simpson pick. The Rams didn't pass on a guaranteed missing piece. They took a guy that is guaranteed to be the future of their franchise and to continue their Super Bowl window being open for the foreseeable future. They passed on instant gratification for long-term gratification. And that's what the Rams are getting in Ty Simpson. Ty Simpson, he may not be a win-now move, but he definitely is a win-now-later kind of move because with how cheap his contract is going to be, the amount of cap flexibility you're going to have because you're not paying premium money to Ty Simpson. And if he gives you top 15 or better quarterback play, that already is a win because he is going to be outplaying his rookie deal along with having a stacked team around him. They always say that a quarterback's success is dependent upon the situation that he goes to, yet we're trying to put a ceiling on Ty Simpson going to the best offensive mind in the history of the NFL, learning from one of the best to ever do it. Ty Simpson was a good pick, and I think it's being overhated a little bit too much because a lot of folks think that somebody else at 13 was going to be the difference between the Rams winning the Super Bowl and not getting over the hump. I still got the Rams winning the Super Bowl. The Rams were Super Bowl favorites before the draft started, and guess who's Super Bowl favorites now after the draft? Still the LA Rams with Ty Simpson. So Vegas didn't really care who the Rams were going to draft 13th overall. They were Super Bowl favorites before the draft and the Super Bowl favorites after the draft. Like, drafting Ty Simpson doesn't hurt anything for the Rams. It just further continues their dominance that they're going to have now and in the future post Matthew Stafford. Hold on, man. My lips are a little bit chapped. Give me a second. Give me like 15 seconds, man. I gotta put some chapstick on, man. Why y'all ain't tell me my lips was chapped, man? Y'all can be honest with me. It won't hurt my feelings. Don't let me come out here with no chapped lips, man. Because I clip these. I post these clips on Instagram, X, and TikTok. You gonna have everybody ranking on me, getting on me, going on me because I got chapped lips. They already get on me how they claim I don't know how to talk. Oh, you got a speech impediment. You talk retarded. Now you finna let them get on me about having chapped lips? Come on now. Look out for your brother, man. Shout out to my guy, Dallas fan and DC1. He says if Matthew Stafford gets hurt, Ty Simpson is going to do what is going to get destroyed. Ruben Bain. Like, Ruben Bain would have been a nice pick for the Rams, but it's like they already got Jared Verse. They got Brendan Fisk. Do you really need Ruben Bain? Now, I get what you're saying. Like, you can never have too many good passers. I understand that, but did they really need Ruben Bain, though? They already got the best roster in the NFL. It's like, I feel you, but it's like, what's going to happen when Matthew Stafford retires? Is Ruben Bain going to play quarterback for Matthew Stafford when he retires? It's like, I don't think there's anything wrong with planning for the future. I think I finally figured out why the 49ers can't get over the hump with Kyle Shanahan. And believe it or not, it has nothing to do with Kyle Shanahan. As a matter of fact, Kyle Shanahan is not the reason the 49ers can't go the distance. It actually is John Lynch. And it didn't take me until I came across a clip from Grant Cohn, who is a beat writer / reporter / great journalist covering the 49ers, because unlike most national media people, they're scared to ask the questions that the fans want answered, which is, why is it that the 49ers have done such a poor job at drafting? You see, the 49ers always have good teams on paper, but once they get into the playoffs and they come up short, it's because they aren't good enough in the crucial moments late in the fourth quarter. They choked 2 Super Bowl leads to Patrick Mahomes. Why? Because Patrick Mahomes just was the much better player, and the Chiefs were the much better team when it mattered the most. And that comes down to drafting and roster construction. And Kyle Shanahan just calls the plays. John Lynch is the guy who constructs the roster. Now, of course, Kyle Shanahan has a little bit of influence in how the roster is built, who they pick. But the 49ers not being able to win a Super Bowl with Kyle Shanahan is a John Lynch problem, not a Kyle Shanahan problem. The 49ers draft to average. They haven't had a Pro Bowler that they've drafted in over 4 years. As a matter of fact, the majority of the Pro Bowl level players that the 49ers have on their team came from John Lynch's first 3-4 drives from 2017 to 2021 are the drives that most of the 49ers' best players right now have came from, or for agency. The Rams and the Seahawks have had much more success in the postseason, and why Sean McVay and Mike Macdonald have a Super Bowl ring and Kyle Shanahan doesn't is because the Rams and the Seahawks are much better building in the draft. The 49ers don't draft like dog shit, but the issue with the 49ers is that they walk away with good players most of the times in the draft. The Rams and the Seahawks, they're walking away with elite players like Nick Emmanwori. The 49ers haven't found a player as good as Nick Emmanwori since like 2021. That's like 4 or 5 years ago. Most of their best players they got in the first round, and they're still sticking with those guys, and they're a lot older. The 49ers rely too much on veteran players carrying their roster than they do young players. Like the Rams and the Seahawks, they're successful not because they got a bunch of aging veterans like Mike Evans. They're successful because the majority of their roster is young and mixed in with a few veterans here and there. But it's not teams that are mostly assembled through drafts that took place like 8-7 years ago. They're not assembled mostly through free agency. The Rams and the Seahawks have closed the 49ers Super Bowl window because John Lynch has allowed it to be closed by those teams because he just drafts to average. And Kyle Shanahan has been making up for the lack of good drafts that John Lynch has been able to have. Kyle Shanahan keeps covering up the poor drafting of John Lynch. Sure, Kyle Shanahan has his flaws. He's not the perfect coach. His late game decision making is questionable at times, but when you have a team that just falls apart in the middle of the season every single year because of injuries, and you have a roster that mostly is comprised of veterans or guys that you drafted years ago than it is guys that you drafted 2-3 years ago, of course, attrition is going to be a killer for the 49ers because a lot of your best players are your older players, your vets, not your young players. When you look at the last few teams that have won Super Bowls, it's been a mix of youth and vets. The 49ers are just vets. And Kyle Shanahan, in spite of how good of a coach he is, there's only so much you can do when your general manager keeps on drafting as poorly as what John Lynch has. Kyle Shanahan isn't the reason why the 49ers haven't won a Super Bowl as of late. They haven't won a Super Bowl because Kyle Shanahan has to keep overcoming the poor drafting of John Lynch. That's why every injury feels like crisis for the San Francisco 49ers. The roster looks loaded, but it's top-heavy and fragile. The NFC West has surpassed the 49ers. They don't draft well. They rely too much on aging veterans that they drafted years ago. Like George Kittle is one of the most important players on offense. The dude's like 30-something years old. Look at Chris McCaffrey. They're running that brother into the ground. They're giving that brother like damn near 500 touches per season. And you think he's going to last? And we wonder why the 49ers can never stay healthy. We try to make it seem like it's some kind of voodoo magic that the NFL has put on the 49ers for why they can't stay healthy. No, they can't stay healthy because the majority of their best players are old as hell. And they drafted them years ago, like Nick Bosa, George Kittle. Those guys were drafted like in the early days of the Kyle Shanahan, John Lynch regime. And they've gone 4 years since not drafting a Pro Bowl level player. The Rams already have rebuilt having a young core, and they haven't fully fallen off when they did it. The Seattle Seahawks have been stacking young talent, young great players for years. They're one of the best drafted teams in the National Football League. The 49ers, they're dependent too much on the core that Kyle Shanahan and John Lynch first brought together when they first got to San Francisco. And that's why their Super Bowl window has quietly closed. The 49ers are one of those teams that you always view as a Super Bowl contender because their roster looks good on paper. But come postseason time, they never look as good on the field during the playoffs as what they do on paper because a lot of these guys on paper, they just aren't able to make it through the attrition of the NFL season. Come playoff time, they're either injured or they just are in the emergency room because they are on injury reserve. Their season's over. Kyle Shanahan isn't the problem with the 49ers. The 49ers have a John Lynch drafting problem. And maybe the 49ers should just take a page out of the Rams playbook. Stop using these draft picks on unproven players and use them on proven players that have already good production and already have proven that they're one of the best at their position. Like, stop wasting draft picks on these guys. The 49ers need to have that F those picks mentality. Because drafting these guys isn't getting them nowhere, especially when you're wasting all these draft picks on 20 running backs. Like, how many damn running backs does Kyle Shanahan need? Kyle Shanahan and John Lynch, they must be trying to plan something. They must be trying to plan a running back takeover or running back revolution, because they stack these running backs like they're Infinity Stones or something. Like, I promise you, you don't need 20 damn good running backs, Kyle Shanahan. 3, 4 was good enough. Brian Robinson, Isaac Guerrero were good enough. You didn't need to take another running back. That's probably the only issue that Kyle Shanahan has when it comes to the 49ers draft. He just loves running backs too doggone much. Stop drafting all these doggone running backs, man. But John Lynch has to carry his weight. Kyle Shanahan is carrying all the weight for the 49ers. John Lynch isn't doing anything but further complicating things for Kyle Shanahan being able to get over the top, because his teams aren't good enough, because the drafts aren't good enough. While we're talking about drafting, the Jaguars had not only the worst draft in the NFL this year, but they had one of the worst drafts of all time. Like, seriously, last year, the Jaguars' best player on defense was Devin Lloyd. When he was on the field, the Jaguars had a top 10 defense statistically. When Devin Lloyd was off the field, when he was injured, their defense went from being top 10 to below league average. That's how important Devin Lloyd was to the Jacksonville Jaguars. And with the Jaguars losing Devin Lloyd, one of their biggest priorities going into this offseason was finding a good linebacker who could give them at least 40% of the production that Devin Lloyd gave them. So with them going into the draft this year, not having a first-round pick, you were excited to see who are they going to draft to replace Devin Lloyd, because the Jaguars had the perfect Devin Lloyd replacement on the board and Anthony Hill Jr., and they passed on him, let him go to the Tennessee Titans in favor of drafting this rando tight end that nobody knew who the hell he was until the Jaguars made the awful decision to draft him. And the only thing this dude does is block. I don't care how good of a doggone run blocker you are. You don't draft a run blocking tight end over a potential replacement for Devin Lloyd at linebacker. That was some of the stupidest decision that I've ever seen. What kind of decision was that from James Gladstone? I had high hopes for James Gladstone. But now after this draft, I feel like James Gladstone may be an even worse general manager than what Trent Baalke was. And not saying something, but even Trent Baalke's drafts weren't this bad. Like, Trent Baalke may reach for a guy. He may reach for a guy in round 5, or he may reach for a round 5 guy in round 3. But Trent Baalke wasn't drafting a pure blocking tight end that would have been a 7th-round pick in the 2nd round, especially when you had Anthony Hill Jr. on the board and you allow him to go to your biggest rival in the division. Not only that, but what about improving the offensive line for Trevor Lawrence? The only help that the Jaguars gave Trevor Lawrence on the offensive line in free agency and in the draft this offseason was drafting Emmanuel Pregnon in the 3rd round, offensive guard out of Oregon. And Emmanuel Pregnon was the only good pick that James Gladstone made this year. Not only is Emmanuel Pregnon going to be an instant plug-and-play starter for the Jaguars, but he's going to become one of the best interior offensive linemen in the NFL. This dude was a freight train mover at Oregon. I don't know that much about offensive linemen, but every time I watched Oregon play, I saw Emmanuel Pregnon putting guys' helmets in the damn dirt. He was the only good pick that the Jaguars made, and probably the most important pick that the Jaguars made, since with how bad James Gladstone drafted this year, he essentially told Trevor Lawrence, hey, brother, go in the closet and put on that Superman cape, because we're going to need you to be Superman this year, because the Jaguars need Trevor Lawrence to be Superman this year if they're going to make it back to the playoffs. You know, there's a reason why the Jaguars haven't had back-to-back playoff appearances since the late 99, the early 2000s, that's because they do a poor job at drafting. This is a franchise that, from a front office standpoint, they don't always have the best alignment on a year-to-year basis. And this was the prime example of that. And a lot of people tried to send me James Gladstone's press conference trying to justify these awful picks. Don't try to double down on bad decisions, because all you're going to do is further frustrate me and the rest of the Jaguars fan base. James Gladstone, in this draft, his message was simple for Trevor Lawrence. Get ready to be Superman, buddy, because if you can't carry us and you can't overcompensate for how bad our defense is going to be, we are not going to be a playoff team. Now, the good thing for the Jaguars is that it's easy for Trevor Lawrence to put that cape on and carry this team with how he was an MVP candidate during the second half of last season, how good his receiving core is, how good his run game is going to be, how great of a play caller Liam Cohen is. So Trevor Lawrence definitely has the ability to put that cape on and carry the Jags to the playoffs once again. But he's not going to have a lot of help doing it because of how bad of an offseason the Jaguars have had. Like, the biggest moves that the Jaguars made this offseason, free agency and the draft, was getting a backup running back in Chris Rodriguez and drafting Emmanuel Pregnon in the third round. That's it. This was one of the worst offseasons in the NFL this year. The Jaguars got worse. You went from being a 13-win team to now looking like probably a 10-win team at best, unless Trevor Lawrence plays the way he did for the entirety of this season as what he did the second half of 2025. Trevor Lawrence has to be Superman. This is what Trevor Lawrence was drafted to be for the Jaguars. A generational quarterback means that you don't need the perfect team to get to the playoffs. Andrew Luck was carrying subpar coach teams for years. Trevor Lawrence should be able to carry this Jaguars team that's forcing him to be Superman because his GM tried to outthink the room and ended up outthinking the Jaguars out of a good defense this year. I cannot believe that James Gladstone passed on Anthony Hill Jr., let him go to the biggest rival in the division while choosing to take a pure blocking tight end over him. Get the hell out of my face. Do not try to justify this pick. Do not try to justify any of the other Jaguars' bad draft picks from this draft. Now, that Maryland safety might be pretty good because there are a lot of Jags fans that are excited about him, but outside of Emmanuel Pregnon and him, this was a very bad draft. And despite how good Emmanuel Pregnon may be, one good guard doesn't erase a draft class that failed to address the bigger roster issues that the Jaguars had. The Jaguars came into this offseason with several needs on the offensive line, at linebacker, and the secondary, and they didn't do anything to address those needs with how awful of a draft they had and how inactive they were in free agency. There's a rumor that said that Liam Cohen and James Gladstone didn't attend the NFL Combine. This drive supports the reality of those rumors actually being true. Because when you're drafting a pure blocking tight end over Anthony Hill Jr., one of the best linebackers, one of the best players from this draft, yeah, you obviously didn't do your homework. You obviously didn't do your research. And it's so crazy how these coaches and GMs try to justify their bad decisions, try to break down their evaluation process, how they rank these prospects. I don't give a damn about your player evaluation process because it obviously isn't that good if you think that a pure blocking tight end is going to be a better player than Anthony Hill Jr. Get the hell out of here. The Jaguars let the city down, man. James Gladstone not only let the city down, but he also let his quarterback down. If the Jaguars don't make it to the playoffs this season, you can point your finger at James Gladstone for this historically god-awful draft that he has put together. I got to apologize to the Kansas City Chiefs. A few weeks ago, I came on here and ignorantly declared that the Chiefs' Super Bowl window was closed for the next couple of seasons because they were going to have to rebuild. They weren't going to be able to address all the holes they had on defense with just one good draft. Well, I was wrong about that. Brett Veach, he went on to this draft acting like the rent was due, acting like he knew the Chiefs dynasty was on life support, because Brett Veach attacked every issue that I had against the Chiefs being able to be Super Bowl contenders this year. He fixed every issue that I used against Kansas City being contenders again and fixed it in the draft. Brett Veach had a masterclass performance in the NFL draft this year. It wasn't a cute draft. It wasn't a lot of household names in it, but it was a draft that had a lot of urgency in it. And you can feel the urgency with the Chiefs' first pick, Mansour Delane, LSU cornerback, the best cornerback in this class. They traded up to get him because they had a fear that either the Commanders or the Saints were going to take him. And Steve Spagnuolo, his defense isn't good if he doesn't have good corners in it. And there was a lot of outrage from the Chiefs' kingdom over their decision to draft a cornerback instead of prioritizing the defensive line. And Brett Veach said, hold your beer, Chiefs fans. Don't crash out yet. In the back end of the first round, he ends up drafting interior defensive lineman Peter Woods out of Clemson, who prior to last season was a preseason consensus top 5, top 10 player in the draft. And the reason why his draft stock fell so much wasn't just because he kind of underperformed a little bit, but the team around him just underperformed as a whole. It still doesn't erase the upside and the potential that Peter Woods has as a very good pass rusher. You don't normally find interior defensive linemen that are as explosive, as athletic getting after the quarterback as what Peter Woods is. And then you don't just stop with Peter Woods. You drafted R. Mason Thomas in the second round. R. Mason Thomas was one of my favorite players in college football last year. One of my favorite players overall on the defensive side of the football. Oklahoma had the best defense in the SEC last year. R. Mason Thomas was the best player on that team. Not only is he sensational getting after the quarterback, but he just has a knack for making game-changing plays behind the line of scrimmage. Sure, he's not that good against the run. It doesn't matter. It's a passing league. I'd rather have a guy that's an elite pass rusher and an ass run defender than have a guy that's an elite run defender but can't generate no pressure at all on the opposing quarterback, especially when you're playing in a conference where gods play quarterback. You need a guy like a R. Mason Thomas that's going to be able to get a guy like a Josh Allen, Lamar Jackson, Justin Herbert off the field in the postseason. That's what R. Mason Thomas is going to be able to do. Sure, he's not a 3-down defender, but he's a good situational pass rusher, so there's a lot of value in that. With the NFL, what do they always say? It's a pass-heavy league. So you get R. Mason Thomas and Peter Woods. The Kansas City Chiefs fixed one of their biggest problems, which was their lack of talent on the defensive line with guys that can get after the quarterback. You got two of them, and Peter Woods and R. Mason Thomas. That's not the end of that, though. They got another good corner that could start day one on the opposite side of Mansour Delane, and Oregon corner Jaden Kennedy, who they got in the 4th round. Jaden Kennedy gives them a lot more depth. He's another young athletic player that Spaz can develop. That's a perfect fit for his scheme. What about on offense, though? We're talking about everything that the Chiefs did to fix that defense, which was the biggest area of importance going into this offseason since they lost so many starters on that defense and free agency. But on offense, they needed a good tag team partner to spell Kenneth Walker when he needs a break. They got that in the 5th round when they drafted Nebraska running back Emmett Johnson. Emmett Johnson was one of the better running back prospects coming out of this draft class. Very good vision, good burst, has a knack for finding open run lanes, and he's very explosive in the open field. So he's going to be a good tag team partner for Kenneth Walker. The Chiefs are one of the biggest winners from the 2026 NFL draft because there weren't too many teams that entered the draft under as much pressure as what the Chiefs were, with how much starters they lost in free agency on defense, with how badly Brett Veach has drafted these last few years. The Chiefs came into the draft and understood the assignment. They needed several impact players that can come and have a big impact right away as rookies on that defense, and that's exactly what they got with Mansour Delane, Peter Woods, R. Mason Thomas, and Jaden Kennedy. I love the Kansas City Chiefs draft. It's one of the best draft classes of this draft cycle because they somehow had all these holes. They had this impossible challenge of being able to find several starting players on the defensive side of the football to replace so many starters that they lost. And they accomplished that task. And that's why I have to change my take on the Kansas City Chiefs. Now the Chiefs Super Bowl window is officially open again. When you have a draft this good, you're going to have guys that are going to be outplaying their rookie deals. A guy like R. Mason Thomas can easily become a 9.5 double-digit sack guy for you. A guy like Mansour Delane, it's not a matter of if, it's a matter of how quickly is he going to cement himself as an all-pro caliber corner. There's just so many needs that the Chiefs had going into this offseason that they had to fill in the draft, and not having a lot of draft capital to do so. Somehow Brett Veach managed to pull off the impossible. Brett Veach was in that war room for Kansas City drafting like the Chiefs dynasty was on life support, like the rent was paid, like the rent was due, and the rent got paid. I think the Chiefs are going to be pretty good this year. I expect them to go to the playoffs, be a factor in the AFC. I don't know if I got the Chiefs winning the AFC, though. I do have them possibly being in the AFC championship, though. One thing I do know is that after the draft right now, I don't see how anybody can pick. After the draft right now, I don't see how anybody cannot pick the Houston Texans to win the AFC and represent this conference in the Super Bowl. They already had one of the best defenses in the NFL last year. You heard Kyle Shanahan before the Super Bowl started during that kickoff show. He said that there were two defenses that were good enough to win the Super Bowl by themselves as long as the quarterback didn't F it up. He said the Seahawks and the Houston Texans. What's the difference between those teams? Why did the Seahawks win the Super Bowl and why did the Texans not? Because Sam Darnold didn't F it up and C.J. Stroud did. And that's the thing. C.J. Stroud isn't C.J. Stroud anymore. He has to earn being C.J. Stroud again. With how bad C.J. Stroud played in the playoffs for the Texans, I'm calling him Coleridge Bernard Stroud. The Texans can't call C.J. Stroud until he earns that name back. I'm calling him Coleridge Bernard Stroud until he proves me otherwise, that he deserves to be called C.J. Stroud and he redeems himself. Because after how ugly of his playoff performances, how ugly they were, I can't call him C.J. Stroud anymore. The good thing is that the Texans did a really good job this offseason at fixing the offensive line and fixing the problem that kept Coleridge Bernard Stroud from being C.J. Stroud. And that's why I'm confident that the Texans are going to make it to the Super Bowl this year, because the thing that turned C.J. Stroud into Coleridge Bernard Stroud was their offensive line couldn't block a cockroach. They couldn't even block you. If you were lining up on the opposite side of that Texans offensive line, you would have been able to get a sack on C.J. Stroud. That's how bad that offense was. And that offensive line, the Texans, they ended up going full throttle on improving that area this offseason. They got Brendan Smith from the Colts in free agency, who was a veteran offensive tackle who's going to be able to stabilize one of those offensive tackle spots. They got Kalen Ratledge from Georgia Tech in the first round of the draft, one of the best offensive guards available from this class, has a very nasty attitude. He's going to be a very dominant interior presence at offensive guard for the Texans this year. When Coleridge is protected, we know how good he can be. And with how good this defense is going to be, Coleridge Bernard Stroud doesn't need to be as good as what he was his rookie season. He just needs to not F it up. Even in spite of all of his turnovers throughout the playoff run that the Texans had last year, that defense was still bailing him out time after time after time. If this was any other defense, the Texans would have got blown the hell out. The Texans defense didn't do anything but get even more scarier than what they were last year. And last year, they already had a historically great defense. But you add a guy like a Caden McDonald in the second round, now you got a run-stopping defensive tackle, which is probably the last thing they needed on that defensive line to really cement that front seven. You got more depth at linebacker. You got more depth in your secondary. I mean, the Texans are loaded. They got pass rushers. They got linebackers. They got safeties. They got corners galore. There are guys who are going to be running the bench on the Texans defense that are probably good enough to start for a handful of NFL teams. The NFL needs to be scared of the Houston Texans because there are not too many teams that are as talented, that have as complete as a team from top to bottom as what the Texans do. You don't have to worry about Coleridge Bernard Stroud throwing away your Super Bowl chances again this season because he's not going to have another 4-interception game because you improved the biggest area that made C.J. Stroud turn into Coleridge Bernard Stroud, which was your inability to keep him protected, your inability to open up holes in the run lane for Woody Marks. Now you improve your offensive line. The run game is going to be better. C.J. Stroud's going to have less pressure on his shoulders because he is going to have to carry the load as much. And then he's actually going to have some time to drop back to throw and actually look like C.J. Stroud again. I know that the AFC is loaded. The AFC has never been more loaded than what it's going to be entering this season, from the Broncos, the Chiefs, the Chargers, all being Super Bowl contenders. The Ravens and the Bills are still going to be there. But the Houston Texans, to me, with how stout that defense is going to be this year, they're who I have my money on making out the AFC this season. This is it for this episode of the JT Sports Podcast. A very long episode, to put it at that, 2 hours long, longest episode we've ever did. But I appreciate everybody that sat through this 2 hour long marathon of me just yapping about football. Before you get up on out of here, do me one last thing. Smash that like button. Subscribe to the channel if you're new. It helps us out a lot. I can't guarantee that I will be live again today just because this live stream took so doggone long. But I'll try to be back on here later on today. But if not, I will see you guys tomorrow with another episode.